Okay. So what I wanted to do with you this evening is a beautiful piece from Chasam Sofer, but we'll incorporate some other elements as well in Hashem. So what we have, Tzaddik, thank you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nivra b'dvaro. Amen. Gewaldig. So as you know, we have Tuesday will be Asara beteves. And the truth is, if you look in Shulchan Aruch, you see Asara beteves is not really quite a standalone Tanis. There is actually a trilogy. There are 3 days of fasts. Don't worry, they're not all 3 mandatory. Only one of them is mandatory, Asara beteves. The other 2, the 8th and the 9th of Teves, are Tanis Tzadikim. So, if you want to consider yourself a tzaddik, okay, you've got a good diet program coming up the next week. Okay. Now the Shulchan Aruch says as follows. The Shulchan Aruch quotes the Bahag, the Baal Halachas Gedolos, and you have it here. If you look on the first sheet that I gave you, the Chasam Sofer brings this in a drasha for Zayin Adar. For various reasons, we're only going to see the Chasam Sofer's output was prolific and unbelievable. And this is just a small part of one of his drashas. Can you imagine? How long the drashas must have lasted, how far how far-ranging they were. So it's the bottom of the first page, bottom of the left-hand column. Kosuv b'halachas gedolos. The halachas gedolos writes, and this is quoted in Shulchan Aruch. Ches teves boy nichtav Torah yuvonis letalmai hamelech. On the 8th of Teves, there was a tragedy. The Torah was translated into Greek at the behest of King Ptolemy, Talmai HaMelech. V'hoya choshech shloisha yomim ba'olam. In other texts it says, Yorad choshech la'olam. A darkness descended on the world for 3 days. Tes Teves, on the 9th of Teves, Loi noida ma tzara hoisabai. We are not aware. We don't know what tragedy befell Klal Yisrael on the 9th of Teves. And that's what it says in Shulchan Aruch. And on the 10th, of course, we'll come back to the 10th. On the 10th is a posuk. It's one of the last posukim in Melachim. Nebuchadnezzar Melech Bavel began to besiege Yerushalayim. He came on Yerushalayim b'motzoy u'v'motzoik, and Yerushalayim was besieged. 2.5 years later, on Tisha B'Av, the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Just before we go any further, just a thought. Why are we viewing as a catastrophe the besieging of Yerushalayim, which led to the Churban Bayis Rishon? Because we know we got Bayis Sheni, albeit it wasn't quite what the first one was. Kananas bifnei anak. Those who, the Novi says, those who the old men who remembered Bayis Rishon as children, when they saw the inauguration of Bayis Sheni, they cried bitterly. But im kol zeh, okay, the 5 things, as the Gemara says in Yuma, that were missing. But the idea that we should still commemorate the calamity, the tragedy, is something that needs thinking about. We'll come back to that if time permits. You know what, I'll do it now, because I know how it works. Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, in Yaris Devash, says the most amazing thing. What do we always say in Torah? What is the rule when you approach any topic in Torah? There's only one rule. What's the rule? Whatever you think pshat is, it's almost by definition it's the opposite. Almost by definition. Why? Because that's what Torah is. Torah is the inner meaning of something, and therefore by definition, I'm sure not you, but me, as a superficial, petty human being.
Don't say that.
Okay, that's very sweet of you to say. But as
you believe it a bit.
It might be true, who knows? But here's the true thing. Das Torah means the ability to cut through the externalities and superficialities and to arrive at the amitas ha'inyan, the inner emes, the pnimius of whatever it is. And therefore, whatever immediately hits the eye, almost by definition, it's going to be the opposite. So what do we generally tend to think? We generally tend to think, okay, we had Bayis Rishon, We lost it, but Baruch Hashem, we got back a Bayis Sheni. It wasn't quite as good, it's true, but we got something back. And then, unfortunately, we blew it again. And admittedly, it was for different reasons, and we won't have time tonight to elaborate on that. Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz says the most astounding chiddush. And the reason I'm mentioning it is because, hopefully, we'll get to it. It is absolutely at the core of what we want to say this evening. He says as follows, he says the other way around. The truth is, the real Churban, the Emes Churban, was Bayis Rishon. Gone. Beis HaMikdash is gone forever. But there was a problem. The problem was that we were not ready to face thousands of years of Golus until Mashiach. Why? Because up until that point, we had Nevuah. In terms of our relationship with Torah, we were incredibly passive. A Navi is a channel, a conduit through which Devar Hashem flows. He has no bailus, he has no ownership over it. He's not allowed to suppress his Nevuah. He's an agent through which Hashem speaks. He's passive. And the flowering and the blossoming of Torah Sheba'al Peh had not yet happened. And therefore, if we were to be thrust out into the long dark night of Golus without the tools of Torah Sheba'al Peh, game over. We would not have survived. So Hashem, B'roi v'rachamav v'chasodav, what did he do? I mean, we saw this, the 70 years in Bavel. What did we do? We married Noshim Nachriyos, unfortunately. We assimilated, and it started going haywire. It is true, he sent first of all Chorosh v'Hamasker, Golos Yechonia. We'd sent ahead 11 years before the Talmidei Chachomim, but Torah Sheba'al Peh had not yet, as it were, properly been established, because you had a machlekas. We resolved it immediately. For 1,000 years, we resolved the machlekas. The first one was, as the Gemara says, with the Smicha on Yom Tov, Yossi ben Yezer. Until that point in time, everything was fine. So we lost Nevuah. And what happened was, says Hashem, I will give you a chance post-Nevuah to regroup and to establish the basics of Torah Sheba'al Peh, Mishnah. And when the structures, the basic structures, post-Nevuah of Torah Sheba'al Peh are in place, 400 or so years later, Hashem says, okay, now we can go back to Churban. The second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Do you hear that? It's to turn it on its head. It was only ever meant to be a brief, temporary respite, so that we should get the tools that will be needed to allow us to survive through the travails of Golus. Beforehand, because we had only had Nevuah, we didn't have Torah Sheba'al Peh, we would never have survived. And therefore, we had Bayis Sheni as a chesed, as a temporary respite. And all it was doing was, are we ready yet for Golus? Once we had Torah Sheba'al Peh established, then Hashem said, okay, now we can have Golus again. It's turning it totally on its head. Bear that in mind, and let's move forward with the Chasam Sofer. Let's do this inside. Says the Chasam Sofer. So on the 8th of Teves, the Torah is translated into Greek. On the 9th of Teves, we don't know. Lo noida, we don't know what the Tzara is. Asks the Magen Avraham and the Taz, the various other Mefarshim on the Shulchan Aruch, what do you mean we don't know? The slichas that we will say on Shivas B'Tam, on Asara beteves, says very clearly what happened. In slichas it says, Shemeis Ezra HaSofer, Ayin Sham. Ezra HaSofer's Yortzeit is the 9th of Av. The Tomuahu asks the Chasam Sofer, it is, sorry? What did I say? 9th of Teves, you're quite right, thank you. And the 9th of Teves is the Yortzeit of Ezra HaSofer. Asks the Chasam Sofer, Tomuahu, it is inconceivable. Shabal halachas gedolos lo yoyodea, he said, that the Bal halachas gedolos, which is the source of the Shulchan Aruch, was unaware of this.
Would you times for that?
Sorry?
Would you times for that?
We have to explain why. That's the point. We have to explain. I haven't explained it, but yes.
About anyone else?
There is. Okay, so yeah. So you're right. That exactly is that is exactly what we need to explain. I'm going to add something. I'm going to throw something in. forgive me, and I don't know whether we'll get time to elaborate, but the Magia on Megillas Tanis, the commentary on Megillas Tanis, says that the 9th of Teves in that year corresponded to the 25th of December. And somebody else was born on that day. A child was born, forgive me, forgive me, a little bit naughty. A child was born, Ezra HaSefer dies on the 9th of Teves, and there has to be a connection between the two. Sorry? Chas v'shalom. Please. What?
That's what I'm saying. Not a guild.
Certainly not. No, most definitely not. But so there has to be some conceptual link between the two. Let's see if we can, time permitting, if we'll get to it. So we have a process here. We have the 8th of Tammuz, the 8th of Teves, the Torah being translated into Greek. We have the 9th, Ezra dying and Yeshu being born. And on the 10th we have the siege of Yerushalayim. What is going on? And to compound matters further, Uksiv ba'Abu Draham, the Beis Yosef brings the Abu Draham, who says, De'im efsha hoyo shecholies yud teves b'Shabbos, hoyu tzrichim lehisanos b'Shabbos. It is true that our calendar is set up in such a way that the 10th of Teves never falls on Shabbos. But were it to happen, theoretically, in principle, if the 10th of Teves was to fall on Shabbos, we would fast on Shabbos.
Really?
And by the way, I'm sure you remember, we've had it on
It's on a Friday.
our Friday, very good. When it happens on a Friday, it was a few years ago, we came home from shul, it was early, and we had to just sit there, twiddle our thumbs, till it was time for Kiddush, till it was Nacht. We had to fast, even though it was already Shabbos. And if it would fall actually on Shabbos, we would fast the entire Shabbos. How can that be, asks the Chasam Sofer. How can it be? Like with Yom Kippurim, why? Because Yechezkel HaNovi is told, Be'etzem hayoyim hazeh somach melech Bavel al Yerushalayim. In this very day, Etzem hayoyim hazeh, like it says about Yom Kippurim, on this very day, in other words, Tisha B'Av, you can push off, not a problem. And here asks the Chasam Sofer the obvious question. That does not appear to make any sense. What is the significance of Asara beteves? The significance of Asara beteves surely is the beginning of a process which culminates in the terrible tragedy of Churban. Now, the terrible tragedy of Churban, Tisha B'Av itself, we would push off. But that which is the harbinger or the beginning of the process can't be worse, surely? That doesn't make any sense. That Tisha B'Av, we're quite happy we can push off to Sunday. But Asara beteves, which is just the siege, that would not get pushed off. There's something going on over here. We need to uncover what's going on. That is the Chasam Sofer's question. Where if you're following with me, it's on the second page with 3 lines down. V'yesh lahavin, says the Chasam Sofer. That was just the beginning of the siege. There was another 2.5 years. It only got destroyed 2.5 years later. Surely it's logical to assume that the actual destruction of the Beis HaMikdash is more significant and worse and stricter for us than the beginning of the process. So why is Tisha B'Av not Deicha Shabbos? What an amazing question. So, skip a couple of lines. And here he reveals to us, even if we don't get any further tonight, the Chasam Sofer reveals to us an immense idea. It should overturn your whole conception of Asara beteves forever. It's an unbelievable idea. So listen to this. Go down another 2 lines. The beginning of the line, it says Rak Hatam. Beginning of the line. It's about 3 or 4 lines further down. Beginning of the line. Rak Hatamhu. He says the reason is why was the city besieged for 2.5 years? Zu machmas, that was because Sheba'oisa Yom Shesamach Melech Bavel Lemato al Yerushalayim. In the same time that down here on earth, Melech Bavel Nebuchadnezzar is besieging Yerushalayim, Kemoikein Yoshvu based in Shelamala. We know that everything that happens in this world is just the external manifestation of an inner essence, an inner process. That means in Shamayim there was a besieging of Yerushalayim that was happening. And there was a celestial, divine court case, a judgment. And the Rebbeinu Shalom sat, as it were, with his based in Elu Maiminim ve'elu Masme'ilim. Defenders, prosecutors, Ad shegovru hamasmi'ilim v'nechrav abayis. Until eventually the prosecutors won and the Beis HaMikdash, it was decided the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. V'hinei ein l'choshana she'en kilolosa meruba mechaberta, says the Chasam Sofer. There is no year in which things don't get worse. Every year is worse. V'chol der shelo nivna Beis HaMikdash b'yomov kilu nechrav b'yomov. Every year, every generation in which the Beis HaMikdash is not rebuilt, it is the equivalent of it having been destroyed in our generation. Nimtza therefore follows. Shebechol shana v'shana nischadesh churban chodosh. Therefore, on each year there is a new churban. V'zehu b'chol pan k'shemagia oisayom shel Asara beteves. Therefore, he says similarly, every time Asara beteves rolls around once again, shehischil oz lemala mishpat hachurban, that in Shamayim on Asara beteves, which by the way is exactly 98 days since Rosh Hashanah. It's another whole shmooze. Depending on the years, the months, and that's to do with the 98 klolos in... leave that, I can't do everything tonight. But, K'moikein b'chol doir v'doir, says the Chasam Sofer, every single year, every generation, Yoshvin based in Shelamalo. This coming Tuesday, the Rebbeinu Shalom will convene the Beis Din, v'goizrin hachurban shel kol shana v'shana, and will decide, will there be a Tisha B'Av this year? The Tisha B'Av is less, it's more and it's less. It's worse because of course it is the Churban, but in terms of the catalyst, in terms of the factors that decide Churban, that takes place on Asara beteves, or at the very least, it starts on Asara beteves. He seems to indicate it takes place on Asara beteves. So if we wish to avert the disaster, the tragedy, the calamitous circumstances of Churban Abayis for this coming year, that there should not be a Tisha B'Av this year, that is our avodah this coming Tuesday on Asara beteves.
So what do we do?
Rega, coming to that. Good question. He says it's merumas v'yodua, and with this he explains beautifully the idea that we would fast on Shabbos. And I'm going to cut through it. You just trust me, because it's going to take too long, and we're not going to get through half of what I want to do. Listen to this. What's the halach about fasting on Shabbos? What would be if somebody has a yortzeit for a parent? Do you fast for a yortzeit on a parent on Shabbos, even though normally you fast for your yortzeit? No, you don't. What would be tanis chaloim? You had a very bad chaloim, and it's something you're really concerned that it is the portent of something negative. Are you allowed to fast tanis chaloim on Shabbos?
No.
Yes, you can. Beseder. Okay, maskin, very good. You have to be yeshiv tanis l'tanisai. But yes, you do fast on Shabbos. What's the difference? Very simple. A yortzeit commemorates something which has already taken place. A tanis chaloim is to avert a potential disaster in the future, something that hasn't yet happened. And that and only that can override Shabbos. And now says the Chasam Sofer, Ge'oinus, now it's poshut. Tisha B'Av is an outcome, it's a consequence, it's something that has happened. Asara beteves is an opportunity to avert disaster, like a tanis chaloim. And therefore, were it to fall on Shabbos, there would be an halachic imperative to fast on Shabbos. That's unbelievable. Let's take it further, let's take it a bit deeper. Let's try and, in short, in brief, because there's a lot to say. You asked the right question. Okay, I get it. I realize I'm scared. Whatever, there's an avodah here. But what is that avodah? What is that avodah? Let's try and understand it in the following way. Let's try and understand the pathway, the process. Let's go back to Nevuah. When we had, and this actually ties in totally with what we've been learning on Sundays, Chacham Adif Minovi. If you begin to think about it, it absolutely ties in. What was taking place until Churban Bayis Rishon. The modality that was operative until that point in time was Nevuah. Torah Shebichsav. Torah Shebichsav, we had Nevi'im. Kiflayim Kiyotze Mitzrayim, says the Gemara in Megillah. There was a Novi on every street corner. You lost your car keys, you lost your donkeys, you lost whatever it is. You went and you asked the Novi. I don't know how they ran the lottery in those days, but okay. You had access to Devar Hashem. You did not need to get down and dirty, forgive me. You didn't need to be oiskim b'Torah. The toil, the sweat, the tears, the amelus, the engagement, the bother, the hard work wasn't really necessary. Everything got resolved. You could have maybe some machlokas, but it would immediately get resolved. We had mechanisms. It got resolved. Everything was clear. You saw Torah Sheba'al Peh. It was there. You saw it. And then Nevuah stopped. And we discussed Hanukkah time why Nevuah stopped, leaving that aside for now. What happens now? Two things happen. There's an opportunity and an incredible challenge. Moshe kibel Torah misinai umsara li Yehoshua v'Yehoshua lizkenim uzkenim l'neviim u'neviim u'saru l'anshei knesses hagdola. We have a shalsheles, a chain of Messiah which involved different modalities. You had Moshe to Yehoshua, we had Zekenim, we had Nevi'im, we had Anshe Knesses Hagdola, and time doesn't permit, but in every one of these handovers, there sat on top of the handover a massive personality who encompassed within him the attributes of that which he was coming from and that which he was handing over to. And the last one was Ezra. Ezra HaSofer. Ezra was a Novi. Ezra, the Gemara identifies him with Malachi. Malachi is Soif Nevuah. It's the last one of the Nevi'im. The end of Treyasa. Then we go over to Ksuvim. It's something else. So when Ezra dies on the 9th of Teves, Nevuah dies with him. That's Soif Nevuah. But Ezra wasn't just a Novi. Ezra was symbolized and stood at the head, as it were, of Anshe Knesses Hagdola. The process, Ezra Ubeis Dinoi, always in the Rambam, the Gemaras, they always associate the brachas, all these things. Ezra did, but he had both qualities. He began that process in a major way. And Ezra did another amazing thing. He took the Ksav Ashuris, what we are familiar with today in the Sefer Torah, which until then was not in common use. It was private. We had used other Ksav, Libuna or whatever. It's an interesting sugyas. And he gave over the Ksav. What was so special about this Ksav? What's so special about this Ksav is that it is the only medium, the only alphabet in which all of the depth of Torah can be seen and can be found if you know how and where to look for it. Rabbi Akiva, the Heilige Rabbi Akiva, at the end of his life, what does Rabbi Akiva write? The Kabbalistic Medrash, he writes, Osius de Rabbi Akiva. He goes back to basics, back to the source, back to the shoresh of all of Torah. In the letters of Aleph Beis, or is rolled up and in concentrated all the Torah, all the depth and kedusha of Torah. That is what Ezra gave us. Nevuah finished, but he gave us the tools to be able to understand Torah and be able to plumb the depths of Torah. Here's the thing. Talmai HaMelech comes along and translates, and this is another piece of Chasam Sofer a little bit later. Talmai HaMelech comes along, and what do the Greeks say? We know. What do the Greeks say? We love your Torah. It's so amazing. It's beautiful. It's lovely. We want it translated. We want it in our libraries. It contains wisdom. It contains beautiful, deep ideas. So they translate it into Greek. Oy vey. Why oy vey? Because once something is translated into another language, once Torah is translated into another language, you lose gematria, you lose shape of letters, you lose concept, you lose multi-layers of meaning. One word which can mean and can be conceptually linked to so many different things. You lose the whole richness and the depth and the kedusha and the beauty of Torah. It becomes a flat, one-dimensional translation. You get one layer of meaning. That's all you get. You can't get more than that once it goes into another language. But it's done. It's out there. And once that happens, and by the way, this is what ties into Isai Ha'ish. Again, it was to belittle the Pharisees, wasn't it, in the temple? To belittle the bearers of the tradition. If you know a bit about the history of the early Christian sects, it's the same thing. And therefore the Chasam Sofer says a beautiful thing. Once on the 8th of Teves, the Torah has been translated, then subsequently on the 9th, when Ezra dies, Lo Noda Asara. What's the big deal? Who needs Ezra? We have the Torah, it's translated. We don't need him anymore. That's the depth of it. Lo Noda Asara, it's no longer appreciated what this terrible calamity, this terrible tragedy of Ezra's death is. And when you have that, unfortunately, you move on to, let me just finish this, go through this point. You move on to Yerushalayim being besieged, and then it leads to Churban Bayis Rishon. Why was Churban Bayis Rishon destroyed? Al ma'avda ha'aretz, Dover Zeshalu, they asked the Chachamim, the Nevi'im, and nobody could say until HaKadosh Baruch Hu came along and said, Al ozva mes Torah, you abandoned my Torah. You had Torah, but my Torah, the depth, the beauty, the brilliance of Torah. Shalei Baruchu b'Torah tchila. You didn't say Birchas HaTorah. You don't say Birchas HaTorah on maths or astronomy or anything else. To appreciate Asher Bocharbonu mikol ha'amim v'nosan lanu es Torasai, which is so much more than just the one-dimensional layer of meaning and knowing what to do and what not to do. That depth, that kedusha, that is what the din is on. You ask me what? That's what the din is on. It's very clear. Kovod HaTorah. That is what the din is on, because ultimately that is what led to Churban. Baruch Hashem, we had Torah Sheba'al Peh, and to this day, I want to read you out a medrash, a tanchum in Parshas Kisisa. The medrash says in Kisisa, on a posuk in Hosea, Echtoi v'loi rubei Torasi k'moi zor nechshavu. Omer Rabbi Yehuda bar Shalom. The medrash tanchum is Islam Adalad. Kesha Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'Moshe, Hashem said to Moshe, Ksav lecha, write down the Torah. Bikesh Moshe shetehei ha-Mishnah biksav. Moshe Rabbeinu requested to write down the Mishnah. Ulefi shetzofa HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu foresaw she'umois ha'olam asidim letargem es ha-Torah, that the time would come when the nations of the world would translate the Torah, v'lihiyos koirin bo yevonis, and they would be able to read it in Greek and say, V'heim oimrim onu Yisrael, and they would say, we are the children of Israel. Christian apologetics, that's what it is. So therefore, what is going to separate? What is going to divide us from them? It is Torah Sheba'al Peh, and therefore it needs to remain Ba'al Peh. Because it contains within it all the depth, all the Kedusha. And therefore what we have, and therefore that is only meaningful, going back to the Avodah of Asara beteves, I'll cut it short, there's a lot more to say, but therefore the Avodah of Asara beteves, therefore it follows. If that is the day in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Yoshev V'dan, whether there will be a Tisha B'Av, remember, on the basis of the Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz we started with, it's Bayis Rishon, not Bayis Sheni. So what is it? Shalei Baruch Hu b'Torah Tchila. They did not have the kovod for Torah. It's very simple. So the Avodah is very simple. The appreciation of Torah, more precisely of Torah Sheba'al Peh, that which comes, now you understand why, to some extent, Torah Sheba'al Peh, which other discipline do you know that a way of acquiring it is through sleep deprivation? It doesn't make any sense. Imagine I was to say to you, you want to become an astronomer. One of the methods of acquiring a deep understanding of astronomy is to eat less and sleep less. Deprive yourself of miut sheina. Makes no sense. Zaydim biyad oiske seirosecha was the last thing we said on Hanukkah. After all the other delineations, the final one is Zaydim biyad oiske seirosecha. What is Zayd? The Pasuk says in Mishlei, Zayd Yohir Leitz Shemoy, an arrogant Zayd, somebody that does things deliberately and on purpose, Leitz Shemoy is a scoffer. It is to mock, it is to belittle the values that are contained within Torah, most notably within Torah Shabbal Peh. And what do you attack? What is the attack always? The rabbis. That's the attack. That you attack that, you get rid of that, then the credibility, you have no Torah, you've got nothing left. You don't have anything. So the avodah for Asara beteves on the basis of what the Chasam Sofer has said, which flows into Ezra HaSefer, where it flows from rather the translation of Torah, and then Torah Shabbal Peh, Torah just becoming flat and one-dimensional, not containing within it the beauty, the richness, the depth, the kedusha, the connection to the Rabbeinu Shalom. Choshech, which again is also the same letters as shochach, to forget. It's Zaydim, you have to make a call. Zaydim or Oiskei Seirosecha, who are you? Those are the two options, there's no other option. You're either an Oiskei Seirosecha, somebody who engages with, delves into, toils. It's hard, it's meant to be hard. It's not meant to be easy. It's not about picture books and art scroll. Maybe we need to use them. It's okay. But that's ultimately not what it's about. That's not the end goal. It's not just the amassing the knowledge. Because what keeps us going, what has kept us going through Golus, is all the effort that we put in. Because then we become we become the Sefer Torah of Torah Shabbal Peh. And Churban, perhaps, hopefully, can be averted. Possibly. That is the idea of